This is our March 2024 13th of the month event. You will see a slightly different BRJA cast of characters tonight because Michelle and Julia, our usual 13th coordinators, were not available to be here tonight. And so other BRJA members jumped into the gap, and here we are. So it's good to see you all. I'm Dana. I am usually behind the screen. Behind the screen is the tech person. But tonight we have Rebecca who's doing that, which is awesome. And we also have Adar and Harriet, and we'll introduce ourselves a little bit more later. But anyway, welcome to the event. Rebecca, can I get... Thank you. So yeah, a little tiny bit of housekeeping. If possible, we love videos on because that allows us to have a more sense of community in the room. If that is not possible for you, we understand. Please stay right where you are. When you're not speaking, if you can stay on mute, that helps with echoes and have you. Your voice is welcome in the chat box at just about any time. And we will also be having times when we ask you to participate, come off mute and participate if you want to in discussion and in Q&A type format. So plenty of opportunity for that tonight. Rebecca, next slide, please. Okay, this is a lot of words. This is our content advisory. The nature of racism, anti-Blackness, and white supremacy in the USA means that a lot of the content that we deal with on a regular basis can be disturbing. So we want to highlight that ahead of time. Tonight, we'll be talking about Fannie Lou Hamer, whose own experience with anti-Blackness, white supremacy, police brutality, et cetera, was severe. And so we will be discussing some of that. She will be talking about that in her own words through recordings we'll be using. And so just to skip to the bottom of this, taking a moment to assess whether you're emotionally ready to participate. And if you are, that's wonderful. And please stay. If you're not, we will see you next time and hope that you have some ease. I think that's it for that one. Oh, and recording. We are recording. I think you probably got a note on your way in, but wanted to make sure everyone's aware of that. So yeah, welcome to Falling Forward in the Fight for Freedom, a celebration of Fannie Lou Hamer. And I'm going to turn it over to Harriet for a little bit.
Great. So I'll give you a very brief overview. If we can have the next slide, it just has some basics for what to look forward to. We'll do some introductions and then kind of do a broad brush approach to some Fannie Lou Hamer trivia, and then we'll hear from her in her own words with some recordings, and then discuss, and we'll close. All of that is very subject to change, but it's just to give you a heads up in case you need to pop out to do something or take your phone with you as you feed your pets or whatever. Okay, so the next thing we'll do is introductions. I'm gonna ask if you all can put them into the chat. We can have the next slide. Yeah, so you can write your name in the chat, add your pronouns if you like as well, and maybe one short fact, kind of what I meant by small here, that you know about Fannie Lou Hamer. And if it's not much at all, you could just say she's a person. Just do whatever you need to do. Put that in the chat. Just the short version. I know many of us could write lengthy novels. Short version. I'll give you all a little bit to start typing. And then I'll ask folks from BRJA to do the same thing after we have some chat. So Dana already introduced herself out loud, but added into the chat that she's fascinated by the pig bank. We have Andy, who is noting that Fannie Lou Hamer was a member of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. We have Chris saying that he doesn't know much, but that she's a voting rights activist. Meredith bringing up that she was sterilized by a white doctor while getting a uterine tumor removed. Mary doubling down on the fact that she's an activist. Yep. Yeah, some folks, Arthur and Margie, who are new to Fannie Lou Hamer. Awesome. We're really glad you're here. So feel free to keep adding things to the chat. I'm going to ask if Adar and Rebecca want to introduce themselves and maybe answer these same prompts if you want.
Do you want to go first, Rebecca?
Sure, I can go first. I'm Rebecca, and I have been learning a lot about the various tactics that she did around voting rights and around organizing in Mississippi.
And I'm Adar, and I've studied her life for a number of years, as I have a lot of the our civil rights elders and ancestors and our freedom fighters. So I'm so glad that that we are going to have an opportunity to talk about her, who is not, she is unsung in my estimation, and she's done so much. So I'm really, really glad that we're celebrating her this evening.
Awesome, thank you. And I'm Harriet. Again, I use she, her, and hers for my pronouns. And I just know little tidbits. And I think from Eyes on the Prize, maybe, or another documentary, had heard about the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. But I'm still uncovering a lot about even just that fact, the more that I have been learning. So if we can go to the next slide, we'll start our broad view of some of the things that Fannie Lou Hamer is known for, and sort of, yeah, more about her as a historical figure. Hopefully it'll be interactive. We'll, ask for you all to write your answers in the chat. So it's sort of like a short trivia section. There'll be, I think it's all multiple choice questions. If folks are okay with it, I'll probably ask for a volunteer to read the question out. That way it's not just my voice the whole time. And then we'll give you a couple seconds to answer. You can answer in the chat and we'll just discuss. For those of you who are diehard fans and know a lot about her, this is not going to even come close to covering very little. You know what I mean? So this is, again, just try to give a broad sort of understanding of some of the areas that she is known for, and to inspire all of us to go and read and learn more. Okay, question number 1. Do I have any volunteers who'd want to read this out loud? Great. Chris, go ahead.
Fannie Lou Hamer is often remembered as uneducated and even illiterate. In fact, she was called illiterate by Hubert Humphrey, BP, in a remark on behalf of President Lyndon Johnson, who said, "I will not let that illiterate woman speak." Should I keep reading?
Yes, go ahead, Chris.
Okay, sorry. So which best describes her actual reading / education level? A, she learned to read at a school for sharecroppers' children, which she attended until 6th grade. B, she read and wrote well enough to be given a special job by the plantation owner where she and her siblings and parents worked. This job required literacy and frequent written and oral communication. C, she failed literacy tests administered by the Mississippi Board of Election Officials multiple times. D, she often recited poetry as a younger person for her family and studied the Bible diligently. E, She was chastised by some civil rights leaders, including the leader of the NAACP, for being uneducated, or F, all of the above.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, so think about it when you're feeling ready. Add what answer you think is best describes her actual reading and education level. Have it in the chat. Just use the letter if you want. Oh, you all are awesome. It is F. So yeah, a lot of folks, a lot of history that's written about her, even to this day, on the Wikipedia page, says that she's illiterate or uses language that implies that. And then the same Wikipedia article will go on to explain all of these facts. So she failed literacy tests that were not. Their goal was not to measure literacy, and we'll look at those a little bit more. But she is a very, she's very educated person in terms of her ability to speak and to move crowds of thousands. And she was trusted. Her writing and reading skills were trusted by multiple employers. So if you hear someone say that she was illiterate, you can correct them. All right, let's go to the next one. Anyone want to read this one out loud?
I can.
Thanks, Meredith.
So question, Fannie Lou Hamer was a compelling speaker. She was invited all over the country to speak. Which of the following statements is not true about her speeches? A, she delivered her speeches from memory, never reading notes. B, she bravely spoke publicly about surviving brutal state orchestrated torture, including beating, sexual assault, and forced amputation of a vital organ. C, despite what it says in Wikipedia and in various reputable, in quotes, sources, President Johnson hurriedly called a press conference at the same time as she was to speak on the Democratic convention floor in order to interrupt the live broadcast, hoping to stop the general public from hearing her. Or D, she worked hard to polish, in quotes, her words in order to be taken seriously by elites, taking great care to use academic language and not rural Southern vernacular.
Thanks, Meredith. Thoughts? Which one of these does not fit? Okay, we've got two people bravely weighing in so far. So folks are correct. It is D. She's known for being just a tell it like it is kind of speaker, using Southern vernacular, not using sort of quote unquote standard American English. And yeah, she got chastised by lots of peers in the civil rights movement and beyond, up to the president for being a person who just told it like it was in the language that everyone was familiar with. Other B or JA folks, feel free to add context or thoughts as we go through these as well. All right, I'm gonna go to the next one and have someone read it out loud. I will happily repeat this one out loud. Fannie Lou Hamer, the youngest of 20 children, got married at 28 to Perry Pap Hamer. She had several miscarriages and underwent surgery for a fibroid that was likely the cause of her fertility issues. It was during this surgery that the white physician, also removed her uterus and possibly her ovaries as well. Unable to have biological children, but wanting very much to be a mother, and the choices are, she and her husband adopted and cared for 12 puppies and 4 kittens from neighboring towns. B, founded an orphanage for young girls that is still operating today. C, adopted 2 girls, both relatives, who could not be cared for by their parents. One of the girls then went on to have 2 daughters of her own as a young adult, and when she passed away, the daughters came to live with the Hamers. Or D, directed a children's choir. All right, so we had some folks weighing in. She does seem like someone who had found lots of types of services. She did not found an orphanage, and she did adopt 2 girls who were both nieces, or I believe one might have been a distant cousin, and their folks could not care for them, so she brought them in. And then when one of her daughters died at a very young age, she adopted her 2 daughters. She was an avid singer, so I'm surprised no one chose directed a children's choir, but you all was too sharp for that. All right, let's go to the next one. Does anyone want to read this one?
Yeah, sure, I can do that.
Thanks, Dana.
1961, Fannie Lou Hamer attended a meeting led by Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC. That meeting is credited as her official entry into Black voter registration organizing. Which of the following was not a tactic used by Mississippi to block Black residents from registering to vote? A, police conducted traffic stops for cars and/or buses transporting Black people to register, including one case where a bus was stopped and fined $100 because the bus was too yellow. B, literacy tests designed to ensure widespread failure could be selectively given to only Black people. White people could be given an easier version and/or could be grandfathered in. C, employers regularly fired Black employees if they tried to register to vote. And since by definition, sharecroppers' land and houses were owned by their employers, losing your job also meant losing your home. D, elected officials passed legislation requiring all Black voters to sing opera songs that neither the Board of Election staff nor prospective voters had ever even heard of. Or E, all of the above tactics were used.
Thanks, Dana. All right, we have a couple votes for E, which, given the track record of this quizzing so far, seems like a safe choice. And given U.S. history and white supremacy, seems like a safe choice. We have one person saying that D sounds a little too wild to be true, and that is correct. I was, any tactic that I tried to think up that was fantastical, I looked up, like, could it have been real? And sometimes, yes. This is the only one I could think up that I don't think ever happened. But Fannie Lou Hamer was on a bus that was transporting Black folks to the courthouse to register to vote, and they were fined by highway police for the bus being too yellow. There were definitely literacy tests, and I mentioned it a little bit before, and we'll talk a little bit more about it, that were designed to ensure widespread failure. And employers absolutely did fire Black employees. And the situation for Fannie Lou Hamer was that when she tried to register, her employer and the plantation owner fired her and kicked her off the land, but required her husband to stay to finish the harvest. And given how those types of contracts were written, that kind of requirement was legally binding in some respect. So she absolutely faced lots of pushback as well as other brutality and backlash that we'll discuss later. All right, who wants to read the next one?
Can I ask Harriet to read it? Because she and Margie are off screen and we've not heard from them. So Harriet, if you would do us the honors, please.
The other Harriet, not me.
The other Harriet, right. Harriet Y, are you there?
I can do it. This is Susan if
Thank you,
she doesn't,
Susan.
if she's not there. Fannie Lou Hamer was one of the architects of Freedom Summer, also known as the Mississippi Summer Project, was a volunteer campaign in the United States launched in June of 1964. The goal was to register Black Mississippians to vote. It also included other projects such as creating libraries and literacy classes for all ages. She hosted white students from the North and Black students from Tuskegee University. Which famous Black activist did she host and mentor during Freedom Summer? Do you want me to continue with the?
Please.
Yeah. Samuel Young, I don't know how he pronounces the name, a Navy veteran and college student who worked on Black voter registration campaigns in the South, organized protests against segregated businesses and white-owned businesses that refused to hire Black people. Wendell Paris, a college student and later reverend, who worked on Black voter registration campaigns in the South and went on to become a critic of pesticide salespeople, the EPA, and the environmental justice movement for not focusing on how contamination hurt Black farm workers and not just the natural world. Victoria Jackson Gray Adams, a door-to-door saleswoman of cosmetics, who later went on to be one of 3 co-founders of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party.
Thank you. Responses in the chat. I think this is a very hard one, Harriet.
Yeah. I got very excited about researching this, and I think I went maybe too deep for the overview aim of this.
But
it's both A and
learning, though. It's great for learning.
The answer is D, which is both A and B. All 3 of these activists are actual people. I didn't make anyone up. It's just that Victoria Jackson Gray Adams was a peer of Fannie Lou Hamer's, and she was a co-organizer of the Freedom Summer. So while she does credit Fannie Lou with a lot of like inspiration and mentorship, they were co-organizers of the Freedom Summer, and she was not coming from out of town. So it's a little bit of a trick question, and I also just got very excited about doing research on these 3 people. And I really hope that you all will too at some point. Great. There's an interview with Wendell Paris yeah, I'm glad people are talking about it in the chat too, mentioning, but very, yeah, very interesting, and passed away in the early 2000s. So there's a lot of interviews of him talking about his time as an organizer and talking about his time as a farm work organizer as well as voter registration. Yeah, let's go to the next question. All right.
I can read this one.
Thanks, Chris.
So, a savvy political strategist, Fannie Lou Hamer helped hundreds of Black Southerners register to vote. She served as vice chair of the Freedom Democratic Party, which she represented at the 1964 Democratic National Convention. She was also a co-founder of the National Women's Political Caucus, an organization operating to this day that seeks to support women candidates for government office. Many Southern states were effectively ruled by one party, the Democrats. Which of the following actions taken by Fannie Lou Hamer related to electoral politics? Option A, she ran for public office in the Mississippi House of Representatives in 1964. B, formed a rival Mississippi Democratic Party and demanded to be included in the National Convention in 1964. C, worked as a SNCC field secretary and organized for voter registration and welfare programs. D, the first and third option. E, all of the above, or F, none of these.
Some of these things we've already mentioned. Some of these things we've only implied. Okay, we've got some votes for all of the above. Which again, given the track record of this quiz, is a safe choice, and you are correct. So yeah, she ran for public office. She formed with Victoria Gray Adams from the other slide, and forgetting her name, but I will look it up. Annie, forgetting the last name, another woman, another Black woman, formed a rival Democratic Party, y'all. Like, that is so cool. And traveled to the National Convention and demanded to be recognized as the Democratic, or as a Democratic Party from the state of Mississippi. And she also worked as a field secretary and organizer. And she talked about how her pay from this job after getting fired and after getting evicted from her home, and then her husband being kicked out after the harvest, was their income for a while. And so it was really critical that SNCC be able to pay for this this kind of activity and support her. Right, somebody read this one.
I can read this one.
Okay, thank you.
Fannie Lou Hamer was brutally beaten by white police officers and 2 Black inmates who were ordered to beat her to the point of their own exhaustion. While being beaten in one jail cell, she could hear screams of other arrestees being beaten in other cells, and it's likely they could hear her. They beat her head and other areas of her body with a blackjack baton. Miraculously, she survived these beatings, but had which of the following permanent effects? A, leg damage, which was visible to others through her limp. B, kidney damage, kidneys being crucial organs that contribute to your cardiovascular health, among other functions. C, eye damage because of a blood clot behind her eye. D, backaches, headaches, leg weakness, and other issues that contributed to poor overall health. E, damage to her heart, which may have contributed to her heart disease and ultimately her death. F, A and B, or G, all except E.
All right. Thank you for that. Okay, we have a number of different, let me see, a number of different ideas here. Okay, so it seems like we have all except E as one of the options. Folks definitely seem to be agreeing that leg damage and kidney damage were a part of this. All right. The real answer is it's a trick question. The official narrative, for those of you who said all except E, that's the official narrative. That she had leg damage and she had a limp for the rest of her life, damage to her kidney, had a blood clot behind her eye, so it had eye damage, and she had backaches, headaches, leg weakness, and other issues that contributed to her death. And all of those things tax your cardiovascular system so much so that I would posit that there was damage to her heart because she was diagnosed later with heart disease. The fact that she had her uterus and possibly her ovaries removed, that can also lead to heart disease. So whether or not this beating was the thing that led to some of those conditions that are listed on her death certificate or not, or some of the other brutality that she faced, it definitely seems clear that a lot was going on for her. She was also a survivor of polio as a child, and she had been shot at a number of times. So she's definitely someone who experienced a lot of physical and psychological brutality, which all have permanent effects. It's a little bit of a trick question because it's hard to pinpoint some of these things.
And Harriet, can I just like strongly suggest that it is all of the above, including E, because there have been so many recent papers about the health of African Americans and other Black immigrants that have been in this country for longer than 6 to 10 years and up, and how health and even the cells change in response to the day-to-day stressors of racism. And there have been papers published in medical journals that directly speak to racism and the impacts of racism on cardiovascular health of African Americans. And there is a very strong link. And if medical doctors are finding that link now with the protections that Black people in the United States do have now, how much more impactful would that link be for people who had none of those protections, right? So I just want to support all of this and say that if we're looking at medical research, there is a direct correlation, just as there is a direct correlation today between the higher incidence of cardiovascular disease in Black people than in other race groups.
Thank you, yeah, for adding that. I appreciate it. She died very young, so I think a lot of, and she spoke openly about her health in public spheres, and for those two reasons, her health is often talked about, and the damage that she experienced and survived that ultimately led to her death is talked about. All right, let's go to the next one. Would anyone like to read this one?
Just in the interest of time, so that we're not waiting for people to
Amazing.
volunteer, I'll be glad to.
Amazing.
In 1969, Fannie Lou Hamer founded the Freedom Farm Cooperative to address racial equity through an economic avenue, launching the project in her rural hometown of Ruleville to support collective Black land ownership and farming, starting with purchasing 40 acres in 1967 and expanding in the years to come to over 600 acres. Which of the following were not direct activities of the FFC? A, an after-school etiquette program for young Black girls. B, a pig bank that gave free pregnant pigs to Black farmers. C, grew 10 acres of cucumbers as a cash crop to sell and fund the FCC. I'm sorry, yes, the FCC. D, a housing program that directly built 92 homes with electricity and indoor plumbing and ensured the building of 200 units of low-income housing. Or E, a financial assistance program to help families buy medicine.
Okay, thoughts on this one? Which of those did she not do? Given that she was somebody who spoke it like it was, she did not form an after-school program that taught etiquette. It was, please look into this further. Like, this program is so cool. Like, what didn't they do is the question of the day. They didn't do an after-school etiquette program, but they did so much else. They grew cash crops. Cucumber was the one that surprised me the most. You'll recognize the other cash crops that they grew. The pig bank. They had food giveaways. And one of the cool things is that when there were like tornadoes or flooding and things like that, they also helped people. They just gave loans or gave housing to folks whose houses had been destroyed through natural disasters. And we'll explore this through her own words a little bit more later. She also, these programs were, some of them were open to white people. So she didn't want anyone going hungry, and she's quoted as saying that. So if there was food left over, white people who needed food could go and get it. Yeah. Okay, last one before we can choose whether or not we want to do the bonus one, but the last official one, I'll go ahead and read it. Fannie Lou Hamer is often referenced by Black reproductive justice activists like Loretta Ross because she gave voice to the all too common experience of Black women being sterilized without consent / against their will. She coined the term Mississippi appendectomy to illustrate the coercion and regularity of these violating procedures inflicted upon Black women in the South. Likely, due to this experience, she A, had no empathy for white mothers and the struggles of white families to feed and clothe their children. B, did not support voluntary contraceptive methods or abortion, noting they would be white supremacist tools to control Black communities. C, started a medical school speaking tour to ensure medical professionals would put a stop to their unethical practices, and they did. Ran an underground revenge campaign where women would gather together to mail roadkill to unethical physicians. This was not a true one. Well, she, oh, interesting. She did not start a medical school training tour. And she did have empathy for white mothers and is quoted as saying she doesn't want anyone to go hungry, and that she understands the struggle of trying to have a family. She did not support voluntary contraceptive methods or abortion, and was rightfully worried that those would be tools to control Black communities. And that is her legacy is often talked about by Black women who are doing the work against white feminist portrayals of and sort of frameworks of reproductive technologies and health in general, saying it's not just about this sort of contextless choice rhetoric, that it is about the ability to not be violated, to not have your reproductive future controlled by white supremacist practices and policies. And so the first Black Women's Health Conference was called I'm Sick and Tired of Being Sick and Tired. And they used Fannie Lou Hamer's ability to speak honestly and plainly about her experience as a catalyst to talk honestly and plainly about their experiences. Okay. There's a bonus question. We can come back to it. We can skip it. Basically, literacy tests are wild. Okay. Okay. Yay.
Show us the bonus.
Yeah, show us the bonus.
Okay. Bonus question. I'll read this one too, just to keep it moving. Passing a literacy test and or paying poll taxes was required to vote in many states and jurisdictions targeting Black voters. These were passed right after the 15th Amendment. The literacy tests were not something that most white residents usually had to take, as they were grandfathered in or they were given easier tests. So which of the following is not a real historical literacy test question? A U.S. Senator elected at the general election in November takes office the following year on what date? B, does enumeration affect the income tax levied on citizens in various states? C, draw a figure that is a square in shape. Divide it by half by drawing a straight line from the northeast corner to the southwest corner, and then divide it once more by drawing a broken line from the middle of its western side to the middle of its eastern side. D, who passes laws dealing with piracy? E, write and copy the assigned section of the Constitution of Mississippi. Write in the space below a reasonable interpretation, parentheses, the meaning, of the section of the Constitution of Mississippi which you have just copied. Or F, what are two requirements of citizens before registering to vote? So first of all, could anyone pass? If these were the questions, could anyone pass? I was just like, what? And these are like in the, you can see the real documents like scanned in with the typesetting and everything from the time. And there's like 30 some questions that you'd have to do in a time period as well. Yeah, so very few of us would have passed if truly given this. And F is the only one that actually deals with anything related to your rights as a voter, and that is absolutely one that I made up. None of them asked about that. Odd questions that I was like, oh, I don't know. When does the U.S. Senator start? Like, with their first day on the job? I have no idea. I have no idea who passes laws dealing with piracy. Why would farmers from a rural landlocked area of the South know that? Why would anyone know that? Yeah, and Louisiana is the one where C, draw a shape, comes from, and they're all like that. They're so weird. They're like trick questions. You can find them online. You can see the exact questions. My brain is hurting from thinking, how would you even do that? Like, underline the shortest word in this sentence. Like, this has got to be a trick. And that's exactly what it is they would just say, like, great job, Harriet, my fellow white neighbor, and like, absolutely not, Adar, your line is not straight enough, my fellow Black neighbor, right? So it's so clear. But even, the other ones where they seem to make some effort copying down parts of the Constitution of Mississippi and interpreting them. Yeah. So if you want to go on a deep dive and look at like historical documents, I recommend this. It is outrageous. And I also want to say this is an excellent example of white people passing legislation that hurts white people. Because after these tests and the poll taxes that went with them were passed, all voter registration rolls went down. That means a lot of white people were disenfranchised, and it was worth it to the folks who are in power because they were like, well, at least we don't have black voters. And so this is I think sometimes we forget that white supremacy will thrive and maintain, and we will take the hits as white people because it's way more important to harm black people than it is to benefit white people. So it's a wild piece of history that Fannie Lou Hamer had me diving into, and I'm very thankful for her.
Dana, when you asked, can she say more about which?
Oh, no, I was asking Andy to say more about
Oh.
his comment in the chat, but his mic isn't working, so that's why I put it in the chat.
Yeah, I feel like he's maybe saying that, of course, they wouldn't want you to know your rights as a voter.
Yeah.
They wouldn't quiz you on it, is maybe what I'm getting from Andy on that one. I don't know. You would know better.
So, Harriet, before we move on, you were and others were reading through this. There are so many things that just resonated with me because they're the same things that are happening today. Can I quickly go through this?
Please.
Okay, first of all, what's not happening today, but I want you all to think about the fact that this was happening in the 1960s. Plantations and sharecroppers were happening in the 1960s. And we tend to think about these things as being so long ago that has nothing to do, with the 20th century or anything like that. These are things that happened in my lifetime. Plantations upon which Black people could be forced out of their homes. This is the America that I grew up in. And this is the America that we still have now. Those things may be named differently, but we see it happening most recently to Palestinian Americans who are losing their jobs over speaking their truths and their opinions. These things happen in America. The other thing that's really stood out for me was the whole thing about classism and respectability politics, that even other Black movement leaders did not like people like Fannie Lou Hamer. They didn't like Zora Neale Hurston because the ways in which they spoke in Southern vernacular or AAVE. Sorry, my cats are over here like taking advantage of the fact that I am on a Zoom. And to be thought of as credible, that there's a way that Black people had to shine themselves up for white people to take them seriously. We see that still happening now. I've seen social media comments on the Fannie Willis trial, and white people slamming the way she and the other Black lawyers are speaking. That happens right now. The other thing that really was aha for me was also the environmental justice and how they were ignoring impacts on majority Black communities then. They're doing the same thing now. And Black environmental justice movements still have difficulty getting funds, grants, because the white environmental movements are sucking up all that money and have that credibility. So as people are saving the whales, waste communities are still going in majority Black areas along with the cancer that comes with all of that. It's happening right now. And impediments to Black voter access and Black voters voting. When people who are have finished their term of incarceration, and we know how Black communities, and in particular poor Black communities, are over policed, and regardless of the crime, how Black people get more time, and so they're not being able to vote or to have their voting rights restored, even after their term is finished. That has a negative impact. There are millions of Black people who no longer have voting rights. Well, white people have the means to go for expungement. That's happening today as it happened then. And the Mississippi appendectomy. We hear more about the atrocities against women in other countries, that history, than we do about how the medical profession was built on the bodies of Black women, the gynecological profession, built on the bodies of Black women who were experimented on without any anesthesia or anything. We don't hear about that today, right? And that was going on even with the experiments on Black men. You know, so there is that. The other thing that really stood out for me was in that time, the Democrats were the Republicans of today. And there was a real shift in parties with the Southern strategy and with the Lily Whites. Has anybody heard of the Lily Whites? It was when the Republicans, white Republicans, kicked Black people out of the Republican Party, because Black people, most Black people used to be in a Republican Party. And then the Lily White movement came up. We don't talk about that. We don't talk about the shift from the Republicans basically throwing Black people out and Black people flocking to the Democratic Party. That's not our history that we're taught. So when we're talking about her crusade for voting access and voting rights and being recognized, there are all of these other things that undergird that we never talk about as a country, that very much impacts what is going on today in terms of Black voter access and Black voter rights. So the facts that you shared with us, Harriet, aren't just those things that happened. They are things that is happening right now, right here, that most of us don't know because it does not impact us or our families or our communities.
Thank you for adding all of that, lifting all of that up. Are we ready to turn it over to Dana to now kind of hear more from Fannie Lou Hamer herself?
Are you all ready to hear from Fannie Lou Hamer herself? All right, let's do it.
Okay, yeah, so in the quiz, Harriet mentioned a couple times the speech that Mrs. Hamer gave at the Democratic National Convention in 1964. And so this is a famous speech, and it was many white people and many Northern people's introduction to her. So this is about an 8-minute clip. We thought we would share the entire clip with you. And I'm going to invite you, if you are on camera, you might wish to turn off your camera and just listen for a bit, and we'll call you back right when we're done.
Mr. Chairman, and to the Credentials Committee, my name is Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer, and I live at 626 East Lafayette Street, Roosevelt, Mississippi, Sunflower County, the home of Senator James O. Eastland and Senator Stennis. It was the 31st of August in 1962 that 18 of us traveled 26 miles to the county courthouse in Indianola to try to register to become first-class citizens. We was met in Indianola by policemen, highway patrolmen, and they only allowed 2 of us in to take the literacy test at the time. After we had taken this test and started back to Roosevelt, we was held up by the city police and the state highway patrolmen and carried back to Indianola, where the bus driver was charged that day with driving a bus the wrong color. After we paid the fine among us, we continued on to Roosevelt, and Reverend Jeff Sonny carried me 4 miles in the rural area where I had worked as a timekeeper and sharecropper for 18 years. I was met there by my children that told me the plantation owner was angry because I had gone down, tried to register. After they told me, my husband came and said the plantation owner was raising Cain because I had tried to register. And before he quit talking, the plantation owner came and said, Fannie Lou, do you know, did Pap tell you what I said? And I said, yes, sir. He said, well, I mean that, said, if you don't go down and withdraw your registration, you will have to leave. Said, then if you go down and withdraw, that you still might have to go because we are not ready for that in Mississippi. And I addressed him and told him that I didn't try to register for you. I tried to register for myself. I had to leave that same night. On the 10th of September 1962, 16 bullets was fired into the home of Mr. and Mrs. Robert Tucker for me. That same night, 2 girls were shot in Roosevelt, Mississippi. Also, Mr. Joe McDonald's house was shot in. In June the 9th, 1963, I had attended a voter registration workshop, was returning back to Mississippi. 10 of us was traveling by the Continental Trailway bus. When we got to Winona, Mississippi, which is Montgomery County, 4 of the people got off to use the washroom. And 2 of the people to use the restaurant. 2 of the people wanted to use the washroom. The 4 people that had gone in to use the restaurant was ordered out. During this time, I was on the bus. But when I looked through the window and saw they had rushed out, I got off of the bus to see what had happened. And one of the ladies said it was a state highway patrolman and a chief of police ordered us out. I got back on the bus, and one of the persons who had used the washroom got back on the bus too. As soon as I was seated on the bus, I saw when they began to get the 5 people in a highway patrolman's car. I stepped off of the bus to see what was happening, and somebody screamed from the car that the 5 workers was in and said, get that one there. And when I went to get in the car, when the man told me I was under arrest, he kicked me. I was carried to the county jail and put in the booking room. They left some of the people in the booking room and began to place us in cells. I was placed in a cell with a young woman called Miss Vesta Simpson. After I was placed in the cell, I began to hear sounds of licks and screams. I could hear the sounds of licks and horrible screams. And I could hear somebody say, can you say yes, sir, nigger? Can you say yes, sir? And they would say other horrible names. She would say, yes, I can say yes, sir. So, well, say it. She said, I don't know you well enough. They beat her I don't know how long. And after after a while, she began to pray and ask God to have mercy on those people. And it wasn't too long before 3 white men came to my cell. One of these men was a state highway patrolman, and he asked me where I was from. And I told him Roosevelt. He said, we're going to check this. And they left my cell, and it wasn't too long before they came back. He said, you are from Roosevelt, all right, and he used a curse word. And he said, we're going to make you wish you was dead. I was carried out of that cell into another cell where they had 2 Negro prisoners. The state highway patrolman ordered the first Negro to take the blackjack. The first Negro prisoner ordered me, by orders from the state highway patrolman, for me to lay down on a bunk bed on my face. And I laid on my face. The first Negro began to beat. And I was beat by the first Negro until he was exhausted. I was holding my hands behind me at that time on my left side because I suffered from polio when I was 6 years old. After the first Negro had beat until he was exhausted, the state highway patrolman ordered the second Negro to take the blackjack. The second Negro began to beat, and I began to work my feet. And the state highway patrolman ordered the first Negro had beat to sit on my feet, to keep me from working my feet. I began to scream, and one white man got up and began to beat me in my head and tell me to hush. One white man, my dress had worked up high. He walked over and pulled my dress. I pulled my dress down, and he pulled my dress back up. I was in jail when Medgar Evers was murdered. All of this is on account of we want to register to become first-class citizens. And if the Freedom Democratic Party is not seated now, I question America. Is this America, the land of the free and the home of the brave, where we have to sleep with our telephones off of the hook because our lives be threatened daily, because we want to live as decent human beings in America? Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. I'm going to invite folks to come back on camera. And yeah, I'm struck as I'm listening to that by what Adar said shortly before we shared the clip, the many things that seem like through lines as we're listening to that speech. And I think folks probably know the context of the speech that she's giving, but just a couple bits about that. So the delegation from Mississippi to the Democratic National Convention was all white. And the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party was formed in order to challenge that generally, but also at the convention. So they showed up at the convention and demanded to be seated instead of the all-white Democratic delegation. That was refused. There was some kind of compromise worked out where they offered them 2 seats. You can have 2 seats, but the rest of them will be for the white folks who came. And there were civil rights leaders who agreed to that plan and wanted to, go along with that as a sort of in the meantime thing. But Mrs. Hamer and most of her colleagues did not accept that. So that whole question of what we'll accept and when, and that kind of strategy was a big part of her work as we're thinking about her. So I'm going to open the floor to Adar and Harriet and then to the group.
I am really interested in hearing what other people think. I mean, we're all here, because Fannie Lou Hamer's story resonates with us. And as we are in the middle of an election year, a very oh my gosh, a pivotal election. What do you all get out of these 10 fascinating facts? What do you all get when you think about even the Black Lives Matter movement of today and think about her, the time in which she lived and the movements back then? And where are you now emotionally? I'm really fascinated, especially with you all being white people. I'm the only African American here. So I am really interested in where you all are today in terms of your own identity as white people receiving benefits from a white supremacist system and learning more about a history which even resonates and is ongoing today. It's not something that just happened in the past. Where are you all? This has been a lot. Where are you?
This is Mary. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, hi, Mary.
Hi. Yeah, I'm not sure where I am to answer your question, Adar. I I really appreciate this time to reflect on the historical issues with our country and its undemocratic claim of democracy, because the present undemocratic claims of democracy are very heavy on me. And to put that in a context of this fight has gone on for many years is very important to me, because I always think of the latest atrocity as being the most atrocious, and this helps me to keep that in perspective. I woke up this morning reading about the 15-year-old child who was killed by police responding to his family's call for help. And so Fannie Lou Hamer's story to me just represents all of the families for so many decades who have been fighting this fight. So I appreciate the historical context this is giving me to deal with my struggle.
Mhm. Thank you, Mary. Others?
Something I've been thinking a lot about recently has been the current efforts to, I mean, really ongoing efforts of disenfranchisement, and thinking about how in the rollback of civil rights era legislation, like voting rights legislation, being called unconstitutional or undemocratic or whatever it is that the people on the Supreme Court said, and given the reasons that they've given. Yeah, I just like I'm really struck. I didn't expect Fannie Lou Hamer to say at the end of that, isn't is this America? Like this.
Mm.
I keep thinking of these like the voting rights being something that doesn't affect Maryland, and I know that's not true. But yeah, it's not something I felt as keenly as suddenly I do in this moment, of having like, such brutal repression just, really brought in full color.
Mhm. Mhm. Thanks, Chris. And Andy, I know you're having mic issues. You may want to put something in the chat. And Meredith and Arthur, what about you two?
I don't even really know where to begin. Thank you all for putting this on, truly. I think I first learned about Fannie Lou Hamer when I also had a uterine tumor removed. And I think about the privilege that I have with the fact that I consented to it. I wasn't sterilized. And so did a lot of reading about the sterilization that happens even today, the recommendations even today around fibroids, who they predominantly affect, and it's predominantly affecting Black women. There are many people in my husband's family who are Black women who were told that they had, like, basically my mother-in-law was like, our whole family has fibroids, and we were all told to have our uteruses removed. And we just didn't listen. And so thinking a lot about that. I'm a medical provider, so thinking about, as a white medical provider, just the amount of harm that the medical community has done, and just the strength and what it takes to speak about kind of the harms that the medical community has done, especially to a room of white people. I actually can't imagine just listening to Fannie Lou Hamer and thinking about kind of what the room looked like and what it must have felt like, and just what you didn't hear was applause or people supporting her or anything like that, why she's sharing kind of violent narratives of things that happened to her. So yeah, that is, I think, where I am and what I've been reflecting on. And yeah.
Thank you, Meredith. Arthur?
Yeah, maybe I'll just add, we're new in Maryland and Baltimore, and so kind of we're learning a lot about how things are here compared to where we come from. And
Where are you from? Where did you all move from?
California. So I've got various things that we've learned, but obviously kind of size of state different and that sort of thing. But one thing that I have appreciated already in my time here is that I've been to Annapolis several times in the last month advocating for different issues. And so there is, I mean, I don't know. I mean, effectiveness maybe is a different thing, but at least there's an accessibility within the state level, I think, to at least have your voice heard. And I really appreciated that, coming from a state that's bigger in the sense that it's not as easy to get kind of direct access like we do. So that's on the positive side. But another thing, I mean, and I think someone said was, kind of watching rollbacks in good legislations and things. Sometimes I see it happening and pick another state, and I'm like, well, at least it's not here. But it's only one, it's just next door. And when it happens somewhere else, it begins to make precedent for other places. And that's kind of one of the things that I've seen happening in other issues, is as soon as one state Supreme Court makes a decision, now another state can point right to that thing. And so it doesn't matter if it's somewhere else, because it will be here. It is here also. And I think it's also to have that sense that just because it's another state, for example, doesn't mean it's not important where we are. And I've learned through my own relationships that things that they might not directly, or I don't understand them to directly affect me. One, they may, and I don't know. So that's part of it. But it also affects people that I care about. And so if it affects people that I care about, I want to care about that thing. And the last thing I would say is I'm struck by watching her speak, for example, and being aware of, particularly in kind of the civil rights movement, of people of color and others taking kind of direct action and be able to speak in those kinds of situations, and feeling disempowered in our current political climate, that people cannot, I don't think, really stand up and say those kinds of things in those kinds of formats. I don't see people sitting in front of Congress doing that. I see a lot of other stuff. And so I think that's just, I'm sitting with that of, where are we able to still have people confronting power in that kind of way? And maybe it is happening, and I'm just not thinking of it right now, having watched a very inspiring speech. But I don't know how inspiring it felt at the time, but looking back, it does. And so, yeah. So that's some thoughts.
Thank you.
That, if I can quickly, there's the whole blue state Maryland thing, I think is a little deceptive. And I think we in Maryland have to be extremely vigilant, because while we don't have a Glenn Youngkin as a governor, for one thing, we just got done with 8 years of Larry Hogan, who was virulently anti-Black. And so, yeah, there's a lot to think about with Maryland, thinking about the many red parts of Maryland, the tendency of Maryland Democrats to move towards moderation and to move towards sort of bipartisanship rather than using their veto-proof majority, for example. There's a lot of ways in which Maryland is just not as blue as it seems, for one thing. And yeah, that can be really problematic. Adar?
Yeah, I so want to speak to that, because I spent about 10 years of my life in Annapolis when I was working for another institution. And my first full session down there, when I was meeting and greeting with all of the senators and the representatives, and one of the highest ranking people in Annapolis, when I had finished my meeting with him, he said to me, and let me preface this too, because it wasn't a mean comment from him. Usually their meetings with constituents, and I mean, I was acting in another role. So his meeting with advocates and educational advocates, it's like 15 minutes. He gave me an hour, right? Because it was just conversation that he didn't get a lot of, that type of conversation. After this, when he was bidding me goodbye, he says to me, "Oh, you are so articulate, and I am sure that you are a credit to your race and to your family." So when Dana says that this stuff isn't, it's not transparent to white people, because that's not the experience of white advocates and activists in public. When I left his office, I saw a colleague of mine, and when you're Black in Annapolis, we make a beeline toward each other just to say hi. I ran up to her and I said, "Oh my God, you will never guess what just happened to me." And she's like, "Who did you meet with?" So I told her, and she's like, "Girl, what did you say?" And I told her, and she said, "Adar, welcome to Annapolis." And she was right. And so what you all might see as white activists or the general public is nothing of what we see and the experience that we have in Annapolis, including knowing that if we speak too freely, any legislation is tabled out of retribution. And so, Andy, this brings me to your comment, which I am totally in support of, when you say, I think that there's a lesson, that the lesson to me is that white people need to support Black people's political movements. And put that pressure on both parties to build power. I think that is like sound advocacy, sound strategy, but it also gives white people an in to knowing what really happens behind those closed doors if you are not white. And how power, the baldness and the transparency with which the white people we vote into office feel free to reveal themselves and to let you know that they don't have to do a daggone thing that they don't want to, and that they can talk to you any kind of way, because what are you going to do about it? So this needing to really cross-fertilize and to build those real relationships, it is so important for exposing all of this. And that's one thing that Fannie Lou Hamer and others did, they exposed all of that. And she, in her own words, talked about the sacrifices that they made as a result of that. And it is economic, it is social, it is physical, it is mental, it is all of that. And we continue to live in these two parallel worlds. Even when she was being beaten back then, and the ways in which the reports were written up, they were just a whole bunch of unruly niggas. It was not written up how it happened and the fact that it was torture. In the same way that police abuses are allowed to go on if they are contained to a Black population and in Black communities. And whatever the police say that happens is what America believes and is what happened. And that is America. Other thoughts? Yes, not to mention the stranglehold, right, of moderate Democrats. And we know what Martin Luther King said about white moderates and white progressives and white liberals. And white moderates, progressives, and liberals continue to live down to his words. The other thoughts about Fannie Lou?
I don't know about anyone else, but having never heard, or at least I don't remember ever hearing her speak before, based on the deal that was made out of her, being talking like salt of the earth, I was expecting something different. Like, I did not sound to me any different than how most people would talk, and I don't know, going to show how different talking patterns were and the respectability politics were, how different they were then, but then also how much they are the same now. Yeah, really struck by how perfectly respectable in the way that people use it today, still playing the respectability politics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just not what I expected at all.
Yeah, all of that. And if you'll notice that there's been a public firing and shaming of Black women, PhDs, from their positions. There was this one white man just raked over the coals the Black woman from Harvard, who was the president of Harvard, and got her out because he said she plagiarized. As it turns out, his wife had done the same type of lackadaisical citations, and he argued that wasn't, that she did not plagiarize, and that it was just like what happens in a lot of academic papers and settings, which is true, it does. But that wasn't the standard to which he held her, the Black woman, right? And so all of these things in terms of people, there were conversations about she didn't deserve her position. This is what you get when you hire for DEI and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, we hear that going. But I know it's 7:30, we have to end, but I also want to ask Harriet and Dana, we barely scratched the surface. And there's so much that really resonates to this, particularly to this time that we're in today. Might we do a part 2 as we get closer? Because the November election is coming, and there's so many parallels to be made. Might we want to do this again and continue these conversations about Fannie Lou Hamer and her relevance to today?
I would love to. Y'all don't know this, but we have so many slides with these juicy quotes, and we were really excited. And yeah, so I think we have to come back. We're going to have to beg Michelle and Julia to work with us to put on a part 2, and I'm hoping that they will be into that.
So keep your
Yes.
eyes
Yes,
out
please.
for that, we will be having a part 2. You agree, Harriet?
1000%. Yeah, we barely scratched the surface, and we only had surface in some ways that we were even going to plan to do. There's so much more. Yeah.
Okay. So part 2 is coming. Part 2 is coming.
All right, so we are going to close now. We have a very short audio clip to close with to hear Mrs. Hamer again before we go off. This one's a short one.
And as I close, I would like for you to take a look in the mirror and ask yourself, as we have paid such a big price, ask yourself, must I be carried to the sky on flowery beds of ease while others fight to win the prize and sail through bloody seas? Thank you.
So yeah, just a little piece to send us off in the evening. We talk a lot at BRJA about looking in the mirror and holding up the mirror for people. And as with the exception of Adar, this is a group of white folks. And so thinking about Mrs. Hamer and the way she still challenges us, I think is really so useful. This little tiny clip was from 1971. It was from a speech that she gave to white people actually at the University of Wisconsin, and it's on YouTube. There's a bunch of her stuff is on YouTube, so I encourage you to check it out. Until next time.
Can I say one more thing, Dana?
yeah,
That
please,
this
please.
is so timely because she died on March 14th, 1977. So as we walk through our tomorrow and consume CNN and other news and see how they spin things, let's just take a moment to think about Fannie Lou Hamer and how many people's were alive in 1977 or had parents or aunties or uncles who were alive in 1977. So none of this is ancient history.
Yeah.
This is present time. And this is still where we are. So her question, must she be carried on the sky on flowery beds of ease while others fight to win the prize and sail through bloody seas? The answer was yes. And it is still yes, as we still continue her work, because her legacy falls to all of us.
Thank you, Adar. We have a couple upcoming events we want to.
And as I close, I would like.
And this is a group of white folks. We are doing a foundational workshop for white people starting in April on the 5th. It's going to be a 10-hour workshop over 4 sessions. It is designed to be a solid foundation, but at a kind of introductory level. So if you or any white folks are interested, please check out our Eventbrite page for more information. Rebecca and I are going to be facilitating that, and we're super excited about this. So all welcome. The next thing is next Tuesday. If you are a person that does hiring for your organization, we are doing a conversation with BRJA about hiring. Those are with Adar, Rebecca, and myself, and they are a lot of fun. It is not a PowerPoint presentation. It's more of a get at the kitchen table, as Adar would say, type discussion. And so also found on our Eventbrite page. I think the last event we have is we will be back in April on the 13th. Oh, sorry. That was more conversations. We'll be back in April on the 13th. I don't know if it will be Mrs. Hamer Part 2 or something else. I've heard Ella Baker floated, and I'm super excited to hear more about her. So I hope to see you all back then. And I believe we have one more slide, and that is these are free to you, but not to us. So if you would like to donate, many of you donated before you even came. So I thank you all. If you didn't and would like to, you can always see that on our website. And we will close with that. Again, thank you all so much for coming. This was a lot of fun. And again, we can't wait to go deeper next time when we come
Can I
back.
say, put one more plug in? And this is our conversations with got me thinking. If you all make monthly donations, you will get a newsletter called Racial Equity Practices. And every month we have articles that that are geared toward workplace practices, policies, processes. We talk about disability in the workplace and ableism in the workplace. We talk about so many things that has to do with organizational culture, with hiring, firings, with trends that impact workplaces, all of that. But that is only available to institutions with whom we do work and our monthly contributors.
Thank you, Adar. All right, everybody. We'll see you back in April, we hope, and then also for part 2, whenever that should be. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you all. Have a good evening.